From the Dallas On Air studios in beautiful Dallas, Texas, this is Fulfillment right here on DallasOnAir.com. And now here's your hosts, the Vegabomber, PJ Dunn, and the film samurai, Carlos Salinas.
All right, welcome, everybody. So, let me just tell you real fast. Welcome to Fulfillment. Today, we have a special show lined up for you today because the last show was special. The show before that was special. So, you should get used to it by now. These shows are special. So, today, what's special about today is we have a birthday in the room. Actually, it was before today, but we have to celebrate it today. It's the Film Samurai.
Film Samurai.
So how do you feel? Do you feel like you're another year older now?
Not really. I mean, the years go by so fast. It's like I'm still like 40 years old or something, you know. But I'm about to turn 60, and yeah, I'm starting to, feel a little creakiness. And
Are you feeling it? Yep.
I still feel okay though. I go swim, and I feel good.
Yeah, I see that.
Almost 60. I guess we have good genes in our family.
There you go. This is what you have to do, folks. When you start to get older, like Carlos, and then eventually me, and then, of course, Kazak back there, you got to start taking care of yourself because to watch movies is a physical event.
Yes.
And if you don't take care of your body, even sitting in a chair can be doomed to you. Also with us today is the big voice behind the camera, and that's Kazak.
Greetings, salutations, campers. Welcome to DallasOnAir.com.
All right. And so, Fulfillment. What is the show about? The show is about movies. We talk about movies. We collect movies. We collect movie memorabilia. We like to talk about movies way after the movie. We will do everything we can to talk about another aspect of the movie because it's all about the movie. So if you're a big movie fan, a big movie buff, or if you're a film addict, this is the place for you. And so normally what we do is we start off with our first segment, and that first segment is Just Seen It. We're going to tell you a little bit about what we've been watching before we jump into our main event, which is to talk about the great movies of the 60s, 70s, and 80s that shaped Carlos's life in honor of Carlos's birthday today, and then we'll throw in ours. So first of all, with the Just Seen It, Carlos will lead with you.
All right, let's do it. All right, saw 3 fairly recent films. I'll start with Relic. Relic, I guess, would be considered a horror movie. I guess it's sort of in the vein of the Babadook.
Okay.
Babadook was mostly about grief. This is the analogy on this one, or the metaphor, if you want to call it that, is dementia. It's 3 generations of women, a grandmother, her daughter, and the granddaughter. The actress Emily Mortimer plays the mom. Well, she's the middle one, I guess, the mom. Bella Heathcote is her daughter, and her mother is an actress named Robin Nevin. Directed by Natalie Erica James. Very atmospheric horror. As I said, it is about the oldest one is on the onset of dementia. Her daughter and her daughter, they go to the house and she's missing. Somebody reported her missing, and then she finally shows up and she's dirty, her dirty feet, but she acts like nothing's happened. And from then on, it's just one strange thing after another. It seems like the walls are closing in. They're hearing weird sounds. And by the end of the movie, it's really like a sense of helplessness and dread. And the sound design in the movie is amazing because there's all kinds of things going on. And there's a lot of different ways to interpret the ending. I won't give it away, but it'd be interesting to hear the different interpretations of this. And some people liked the ending, some people didn't. But
really,
I kind of recommend it. It's very well done. If you like these kind of atmospheres, slow build horrors, very good. And the actresses, all 3 of them, are excellent in it. The second one I watched was an Amazon original movie called Radioactive, directed by Marjane Satrapi. I believe she's Indian. I could be wrong.
Okay.
Biopic, of course, of Marie Curie, played by Rosamund Pike. If you know Rosamund, she's
Gone Girl.
Gone Girl, yes.
Yeah.
She plays this in a very older age makeup. I mean, she looks, her hair is frizzy and she's got wrinkles and stuff. Her effort in the film was valiant, but man, this movie didn't quite do it for me because it was
radioactive.
It was really radioactive. I mean, she died because of all the the research she was doing with radium and the tests she was doing. But it also intersperses the film with, because of her work, people were able to be not cured of cancer, but treated for cancer. Like a child had leukemia.
Yeah.
They put him in this machine, all because of her. She was the first one to come out with these mobile X-ray machines that during World War I they used to save dozens of guys from getting their legs sawed off because they had a broken ankle.
Yeah.
And they were doing stuff like that. She had to fight, of course. They discussed her marriage to Pierre Curie. She was Polish. I didn't realize that. But she was smart. But the movie didn't do her justice, because in an hour and a half, you really can't tell the life of this incredible woman who did all this stuff. It would have been great as maybe a series, but it seems like everything was quick, cut short, and it was interesting the way it was done, and the style of it was interesting, but it could have been. There was so much potential here. It could have been really good.
Yeah.
The last one I'll talk about is Ip Man 4, the finale. And I don't know if you've ever seen any of these Ip Man films, but they are awesome. Donnie Yen plays Ip Man. If you don't know who Ip Man is, he was the teacher of Bruce Lee, basically. Chinese kung fu master. And the way Donnie Yen plays him, man, he plays him with this stillness, this calmness. He's so grounded and cool. And he only fights when he absolutely has to. And when he does, oh my God, he just lays waste to people. And this particular film has a lot to do with like what's happening now, racism and bullying and things like this. The story is he comes to the United States, to San Francisco, to visit his ex-pupil, Bruce Lee, who's just opened these Wing Chun School of Kung Fu. And it's really Bruce's own style. And of course, the local masters don't like it because he's teaching Westerners. Why is he allowing Westerners? It should only be for the Chinese people. So it's very closed-minded on that side. And then on the other side is the locals. There's a Chinese girl who is in school, and she's a cheerleader, and she's done some new moves, and of course, Becky doesn't like it. So she bullies her and tries to beat her up along with her friends, like 5 guys and 1 girl on 1 Chinese girl.
Yeah.
And of course, like Karate Kid style, here comes Donnie Yen and Yip Man and basically stops it. He teaches these little punks a lesson. And then one thing leads to another and to another, and then next thing you know, Scott Adkins, I'm not sure if you know this actor, he's a great martial arts actor. He does a lot of action stuff. He plays a sergeant in the Marines. And it's like so many things going on in this movie.
Wow.
But it's so good. And he that's kind of like the final fight. He has to take on this.
How many of these did they make?
4.
They made 4 of them?
Yep.
Okay.
Mike Tyson was in one of them. I think he was in number 3.
Wow.
And that was something else. They kind of got more outrageous as they went along, but I love him. I just love Donnie Yen. I love his style of fighting. He's so fast. He always does this trademark, like his fists are just flying, and beats guys down. Just down to the ground basically. And he kicks, and it's just great. I love kung fu movies, in particular Asian movies, martial arts, all that stuff. So yeah, it was kind of a great end to the Ip Man saga.
Nice, love it. Yeah,
It was good.
Fan of those as well. Hey, Kazak, what have you seen lately, bruh?
All right. So first off, I do want to go ahead and plug our opposite show on Sundays, the Rancourt Pit Live, as me, Eddie, and a couple of folks from the con scene here did a deep dive into Spaceballs. So we did an hour-long dive into Spaceballs.
Nice.
So
Nice.
So please, if you
Great
have the ability,
parody.
go check out rerun on DallasAir.com. Check out the Rancourt Pit Live. Of course, they're here every first and third Sunday, whereas to us we're second and fourth. So, but yeah, the Spaceballs still holds up. The second one that I want to talk about, I don't need to say anything about it because we go into it for an hour, but
Right.
again, it's still just a fantastic film.
Like Airplane.
Yeah. Exactly. The second one that I want to go into, finally saw Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of Harley Quinn. I can't say that it's a great film.
No.
I can't say it's a great comic book film. I can't even say it's a great Batman DC film. What I can say, though...
Yep. I'm listening.
Kathy Yan and the direction on the fight sequences is spectacular. It really, really is just well choreographed. You have some amazing fight sequences. I mean, the roller skating sequence with Harley riding on the front bumper of a car on roller skates is fantastic.
Wow.
Well choreographed Joker Funhouse fight scene. Basically, it's very visual, it's very colorful, but the rest of the film sucks. You can get about 20 minutes of great action. The rest of the film is just.
What'd you think of Ewan McGregor?
He's Ewan McGregor. He's just he is what he is.
Well, hello there.
It's just this is my paycheck, but I'm gonna have fun with this, and it's obvious he doesn't really care, but he's enjoying himself, and you have Victor Zsasz in there, which wasn't too bad. Yeah. So it is what it is. But and what made me sad is that there wasn't enough Mary Elizabeth Winstead, the Huntress. So it kind of got me on an Edgar Wright kick this week. Okay. So I went back and watched Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Okay.
One of Mary Elizabeth's finest hours. Edgar Wright directed. It's a film ahead of its time. It just basically no one really caught on to this film in the theaters. It's a shame because it was really, really beautiful visually.
Okay.
But like I said, once you go back on DVD, you watch it over and over again, and I mean, there's just so much fan service, and I mean, the cast in and of itself is amazing. Michael Cera, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Brandon Ruth, Chris Evans, just Aubrey Plaza, Anna Kendrick, all these people who were not who were just on the precipice of being big, blow up in this film. And I mean,
nice.
Because it is the 10th anniversary of Scott Pilgrim versus the World, there are a couple of things that you've got.
It's been 10 years already?
It's been 10 years. This week, Entertainment Weekly released an hour and a half hosted Zoom reading of the screenplay. And of course, they also released a great oral history of the film.
Wow.
So, like I said, if you're a fan of that film and want to get into deep dives on both, do go ahead and check those out. Finally, I started going into Edgar Wright's classic sitcom out of BBC, Spaced. 14 episodes. Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, and Edgar Wright just basically giving the fanboys exactly what they deserve, and giving them just a fantastic absurdist treatment.
The art episode is my favorite.
Yep. Simon Pegg, Jessica.
It's brilliant.
Simon Pegg, Jessica Hines play a couple.
They're pretending to be a couple because that's the only way they can stay this apart. But by the end of the series, you find out she didn't really care if they were a couple or not.
Yeah. But it's amazingly funny. It holds up, and of course, like I said, it's so much fanboy comedy in there. Any film lover who loves fanboy stuff really needs to go back and check out that series. And it's on Hulu now.
So great.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Great editing on that show.
Oh God, yes.
Oh my God. So many quick cuts and zooms and all over the place.
And I mean, it's just little subtle things, like in the first episode, you see Simon Pegg sculpting mashed potatoes into the Devil's Tower. Just little things.
Oh man, every episode like had 100 Easter eggs in it.
Yeah. What about you, PJ?
Well, I didn't get a chance. I've been filibustered by a lot of work this week, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. So the only thing I was able to do was sit down with a friend who, because of the social unrest and everything that's going on right now, he was asking me, hey, what are some good films I can watch to help me understand about police brutality and understanding the justice system and how it is. And I said, the film you want to watch, and I'll watch it with you if you just want to have somebody to talk with about it, because, a film person is going to do that. Mm-hmm. And so we watched Ava DuVernay's, who directed Selma, 13th, the movie that's a documentary about the 13th Amendment and what the loophole is in that legally as to what you could do. So most people, when they think of the 13th Amendment, they think of, okay, that's the amendment that emancipated the slaves, but it also has an exception clause in it. You can't slave anybody who's free, but you can slave anybody who's in jail or in prison. So what this did is it said, oh, well, now that we don't have slaves to do all this free labor force anymore, if we can just catch them on BS stuff like vagrancy or loitering or whistling at a white woman or something, we can put them in jail and jail them by the numbers, and then they can be leased out as convict leasing program and go back to the very same places they used to slave and work there, but they're put out by the state to do so. So this film goes from back then, shows how America in 1970 only had like maybe 300,000 people in jail, which is still a lot. But by the time you get to today, and the film came out in 2017, I think, you're up to 2 million people that are incarcerated in America, which leads the whole world in terms of people incarcerated. And then it talks about the number of prisons we have, the whole school to prison pipeline. And so this film is great. It pulls all these great people like Bryan Stevenson, who did the movie Just Mercy, which was based on his book. You have all these great, even Angela Davis, who's an adjunct professor now, former Black Panther, but adjunct professor, teaching about these sort of things. They had all the star-studded people who know exactly about how the political landscape helped criminalize people, particularly African Americans and Hispanics. And when you can do that, then you can now take away the opportunity for wealth, because if you're a felon, nobody's going to hire you. Yeah. And then the odds that you're going to probably go right back into the system, because what can you do when you know, not everybody wants to be a manager of McDonald's, and not that that's necessarily a bad thing if that's what you do. So it shows how it went from Black people being as slaves to now they're being sold as the criminal. So you see, even Hillary was calling them super predators. That was the way they termed Black people without saying Black people. So this documentary was incredible. So me and my friend sat down, we watched it. I already knew it was a good one. How you can love it from a watch perspective is Ava DuVernay didn't do a typical documentary. A typical documentary is some guy who looks like he does nothing but eat paint chips and read books and has these old wireframe glasses and has a bunch of books behind him talking, and that's very boring to watch. And then you see some old boring graphics at the bottom, professor of so-and-so and so-and-so humanities, right? Well, here she's taken all these special people, she's put them in unique backgrounds and has the camera moving, so you don't feel like you're just watching a talking head every time they have to get a professional opinion from one of these guys.
But it's done in a way that's not distracting.
Absolutely done without. And then the way she uses graphics. So whenever they say something, she'll then put up a graphic showing you, here's how it went from 1970 to all the way up to now.
Wow.
Showing, so you get visual, you get the auditory of hearing them say it, and then you get to see the types of people. These are professors, these are lawyers, these are civil rights activists, and some of these people were people who were incarcerated for something that they didn't do, and now they're out and they're talking about that experience and what happens to you. So you get all the different sides of what mass incarceration is. And according to Michelle Alexander, mass incarceration is the new Jim Crow. And if you want to look her up and read her book, excellent points in what she's making. So whenever something, quote unquote, dies, it usually doesn't die. It just comes back in another form, right? So slavery died in the way that we had to get rid of it then, but then you had mass incarceration to take its place, and then Jim Crow laws and all these other things. So it's a very unique perspective if you're a person that's into history as well. If you love the civil rights era of this country, the 60s, which was pretty interesting. It produced a lot of crazy things, but even before that, the 50s did, and World War II, right? So if you want to get the complete look of, hey, how did we get to where we are today? And what does it mean when people say, I can't breathe, and then other people wear shirts that say, well, I can breathe, F you, and they're police officers, right? And you have all this craziness. You have to go back and you have to look at the history. So for people who say they don't understand why there's such a tense relationship between African Americans, or any minority for that matter, with cops in low socioeconomic areas, this will help explain that to you. Because it's extremely reductionist just to go, well, why didn't they just not resist? If it were just that simple, it would have happened. But obviously there's much more to it, and this lays out all the context. So if you haven't seen it, very powerful documentary, and one that you won't get bored watching, because again, the way she shoots, it doesn't feel like, oh, here's another smart person just pontificating on how intelligent they are off all the books that they've read. And you'll find it a really good watch. So that's what I watched, and I had a blast of doing it. But then again, I'm a history nut, and I love the civil rights movement in this country, because out of it came a lot of great stuff. So, so there's that. So let's now boys and girls, cats and kittens, puppies and dogs, let's take a look at the main topic of the show today. And in honor of our boy, the film Samurai, we're going to look at a couple of decades. We're going to look at the 60s, 70s, and the 80s. And from the perspective of the Samurai, what were these films from those decades that kind of helped him form his love for film and there? And so we're going to start with the film Samurai.
All right, let's do it. Let's start with the 60s. I was born in 61.
Okay.
So these first couple of movies were not movies I particularly saw in theaters because I was too young. But these were the first movies that I watched the whole movie all the way through on television when they were repeated. The first one, 1962, Gregory Peck in To Kill a Mockingbird. Wow, it's a powerful film, and we were always so enraptured by this film. My brother and I, we were always the ones who were always sitting down together and watching these films. And
Okay.
And this is the first exposure I had to like racism and injustice, and that courtroom scene towards the end is just one of the all-time classic bits of cinema. You know, shot in black and white. Of course, these were early 60s films. So, yeah, and Gregory Peck is just an icon. You know, an actor, and his bearing and his composure in the face of the ugliest racism. You know, was just something amazing to watch. 1963, Jason and the Argonauts. This is what spurred my love of fantasy films. You know, you go from Star Wars and all these kind of films. It all began with like Jason and the Argonauts, the work of Ray Harryhausen, and the stop motion animation, the creatures. Especially the skeleton fight was always the one we were just looking forward to watching. You know, when they first charged and they let out that scream, and the harpies, how they captured these harpies, these devil-looking creatures. You know, Talos, you know.
And when you see that revisited in stuff like Army of Darkness and things like that, you realize just how technical it was and how great it was.
Yeah, it just like we were just like sitting there like. Watching these movies, you know, that was such a great formative of my love of fantasy, and from then on, I consumed everything like that. You know, 69. As I got older, I got into more. I probably saw this movie at either a drive-in or one of the downtown theaters at the time. But it was Sam Peckinpah's The Wild Bunch.
The Wild Bunch.
I was always into westerns, but this is one of the first westerns that was really extremely violent. You know, the Sam Peckinpah's trademark is the slow motion violence. The guys getting shot 100 times and taking forever to die, and this the showdown at the end where these last few guys of the Wild Bunch, this gang who were basically bank robbers, they were fighting like 100 Mexican federales. You know, so. Yeah, it had a really big effect on me, and it probably something in my psyche from then on. Like I was just fascinated with any movie that had this kind of hyper violence in it. In the 70s,
Do we want to rotate 60s or do we want to?
Oh, okay.
rotate
Yeah, let's
60s.
do that.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's good. Yeah.
let's do that.
K-Zach, 60s. Formative for you.
All right. So for me, let me get to my stuff. Hi there. All right. So the first one that I chose from the 60s was George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead. It's just one of those films that it's so stark and so frightening, but it's so impactful and perfectly paced. You have, heroes weren't necessarily heroes basically having to step up. You have a desperate situation, and not to mention it's just a gruesome film in black and white because you have of course a house being chopped in by zombies. You go from the wide expanse of the graveyard to this one house where it's the last stand for these folks. And then you see, of course, the government coming in and things like that. And I mean, I don't want to spoil that end because it's one of the most impactful endings in film history. But I mean, it's important because you have Dwayne Jones as a noble man of color appearing on screen and being the hero, stepping up and saving all these people, or at least trying to. And of course, that ending is just Well, of course, it's one of the iconic horror films of all time for a reason. It's a statement on the decade, and it's a real statement in horror. Um, the second one that I chose was excuse me, a little film from Britain called Bedazzled. Bedazzled stars Peter Cook, Dudley Moore. It's
Raquel Welch.
Raquel Welch.
Raquel Welch,
Okay.
yeah.
It's an absolute Raquel
gosh.
Welch's lust. Basically, Peter Cook is the devil and buys Dudley Moore's soul with a chance to basically get him the girl he wants, get him everything he wants. But every time he keeps on coming back, it just goes wrong. It's an absurd kind of Faustian comedy, but good God, is it funny.
Didn't they remake that
Yes.
with Elizabeth Hurley and Brendan Fraser? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
She looks great in it, though.
Yeah.
She does look great. Finally, out of the 60s, because I know we're going to talk Western Channel and we're going to talk your favorite westerns, so I got to go into the Man with No Name trilogy.
Yes.
Just all three of them. The films themselves, like I said, are not great, but what it is they're intense.
Yes.
They're small. They're compact. And of course, like I said, it's not necessarily all about the violence, but it is about the look. It's about just basically holding an image of a person, holding a character. I mean, you never see. I don't think.
Close-ups.
Yeah, I've never. Right. You don't really get the impact of just someone's eyes until you actually see them. And I mean, it's just that tight shot.
Yes.
That Sergio Leone gets. And of course, that score. We lost Ennio Morricone this week.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's that sound, and of course the films get better as you go throughout, because Sergio Leone's going from these cheap spaghetti westerns into bigger and bigger, and I mean you get guys like Lee Van Cleef, you get just iconic villains, you get, and of course you've got Clint Eastwood, who is absolutely just makes his presence known on the movie. It's still just fantastic, and it's fantastic to go back and watch again. All of them.
Yes. And if you're new to the show, this is our thing, right? We talk about the movies that are super enjoyable, more so than what's best and whatever all that is. That's pretty subjective. But we're talking about movies that you literally can sit down with and say, and actually have a good time and be glad that you spent that 2 hours watching it. Because nowadays, that 2 hours you could have used doing so many other things. There's so many things you could do today. But this is a time when you sat down for a movie for 2 hours, you probably were super entertained because there was nothing else to distract you from it. You just got into it and you got into the storytelling. Or if it wasn't that, the visuals and the camera shots and the panning and the cutting and the pacing and then the dialogue, because we did a whole show on quotes and dialogue, and that's very important.
Absolutely.
So when you see that pulled together, it's a wonderful thing. For me in the 60s, this was hard as well. I was born in 68, so I was born after Carlos, which is why I don't have as much gray yet, but I'm working on it, I'm sure. I started with Magnificent Seven because to me as a boy, you loved Westerns because that's what you had on TV. You had The Rifleman, right? You had Bonanza. You had The Lone Ranger.
Alive.
You had all this stuff. It was always about the Western and what does it mean to be this guy with you got the gun and you got this big wide open spaces and you got bankers trying to bank run people off of their land because they want to run a train through there, or you've got Indians, or you've got the Mexican federales or something that's going on, something that's going on, and you're wondering how is this one guy gonna boss up and handle a situation. So you usually got a lot of great one-liners out of it, which showed up later on in the Dirty Harry movies. Oh, yeah. The one-liners, the guy with the gun that steps up and almost treats it like the Wild Wild West is what Dirty Harry does. So I love the Magnificent Seven. Seeing these guys all pull together, the music, Yul Brynner, Steve McQueen, Charles Bronson, Eli Wallach is one of the Mexicans, and it's just right, and the shots. And so what I loved about it was the again, you talk about it, is the violence, but it was the kind of violence you could take in back then without it being real crazy. So when you see guys in a shootout, because a guy's trying to protect some horses in a corral, and the places where you'd have to hide and where people could be hidden, and where they could shoot from roofs, or they could shoot from behind a hay bale, or they could pretend like they were dead and all of a sudden shoot. I mean, all this stuff was really creative. And
Come
as
out
a kid,
of a water trough.
come out of the
That was
yeah.
that was always a great one.
You know, and this was kind of like one of the first Justice Leagues, and of course, this was taken from Kurosawa's Seven Samurai.
Yeah, it takes so brilliantly out of it. You know, good artist borrow, great artist steal, and they stole so heavily from the movie, but they stole it perfectly.
Yes,
and
they did.
And they put it in the context that Americans can understand.
Yes, that's exactly right. And then my next pick was, as a kid, I loved the Planet of the Apes. And of course, back then I had no idea. I just loved seeing the costume, the whole idea of apes supposedly talking, Roddy McDowell, and just the idea that this is a sci-fi, very complicated film that's showing that, hey, in this world where we're assuming that we're on this different planet, it's the apes that are in charge, and it's the humans that are the slaves. And so that whole social commentary.
Brilliant script by Rod Serling.
Oh my gosh, yeah, Rod Serling is, yes, I almost forgot about that. And so for me to see Cornelius and to see some of the lines that came from that movie, you know, dirty damn ape, you know. And as a kid, again, I'm talking like, this is probably, by the time I saw it was in the 70s, even though it came out in the 60s. And so as a kid, I'm looking at the design, and I'm imagining the world of talking apes for the first time. And then what would that be like? And then I remember just being terrified of some of the apes.
The gorillas, yeah.
Right?
The military.
The gorillas, right?
And I mean, for Chuck Heston, this is a paycheck, but the movie itself is fantastic. I mean, he's chewing the scenery throughout the whole thing.
Yep.
Don't get me wrong.
Yes, sir.
But it's, but the movie itself is well written. It's pieced together so nicely.
Classic ending. Oh my
Very classic ending that I won't tell you. If you haven't seen the Planet of the Apes series from the 60s that went well into the 70s, you have to go sit down and spend some time watching that to get a good sense of sci-fi, actually. An early view of what that could possibly look like in the costuming as well, if you're into that sort of thing. And so my number one from the 60s would be a pivotal film about one of my favorite actors, Sidney Poitier, in the film from 1967, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? Now, it's interesting because what we've talked about already about the racial unrest and this sort of thing. Well, here is a film that comes out that is made, 4 or 5 months after the miscegenation laws of 1966 were finally struck down in the case of Loving versus State of Virginia, which was different. It was a white man married to a black woman. And so in this case, in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, it's a progressive family. It's a white girl bringing home her fiance, who's a doctor, and Sidney Poitier, to her progressive family, and how that was kind of going down, even amongst liberals, kind of struggling with the idea of how will this be perceived, what will they think, and then Sidney Poitier, surprisingly enough, it's excuse me, it's Spencer Tracy, Katharine Hepburn, and her niece, Katherine Houghton, who plays the young daughter who's dating the African American. And it's interesting that that movie got nominated for 10 awards, but only won 2. And one of them was for leading actress. And so Katharine Hepburn got one of her many awards. Wow. Sidney Poitier didn't even get nominated for lead actor, but Spencer Tracy did. Jesus. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So Sidney Poitier had to win his a few years earlier in a 1963 film. That's the only one that he won, but you could make an argument that he should have won more than just the one particular one that he got. So for the 60s, those were the films that were real pivotal to me because my parents, in this case, my dad's black, my mom's white. So for me to see this on screen as a young kid, seeing how America dealt with race and interracial relationships, it was kind of telling.
That's heavy.
So now let's jump to the 70s and back to Film Samurai.
All right, 70s. Let's do it. 1975, man, I was into albums and LPs and posters on my wall and stuff. And the Who, this movie turned me on to the Who. I was not a big Who fan, but when I saw Tommy, directed by Ken Russell, oh my God, I saw this at the old Inwood Theater, and man, I was blown away. I don't know, how old was I? 61, 75, I don't know, 12, 13, something like that. Yeah. But oh my God, the visual style of Ken Russell, of course, he's way over the top, and this is almost like the music videos, it was kind of in that style, and the cast, Oliver Reed and Margaret, who were the parents of Tommy, Roger Daltrey, playing the title character. The rest of the Who were in other roles. One of the stand-up was Uncle Ernie, Keith Moon.
I
God.
actually did Tommy in college, the
Did you
musical,
really?
and
What?
I was Uncle Ernie.
Oh,
Uncle Ernie.
I
Oh,
did,
wow.
I did the Keith Moon part.
that was awesome.
But yeah,
And Cousin Kevin terrified me, man. That kid was but the movie from beginning to end was just mesmerizing to watch. I was just so into it. So man, I consumed everything The Who after that. 1978, my first date movie. The first time I ever picked up a girl in a car and drove her to the movies was to see The Deer Hunter. Michael Cimino.
I don't mean to laugh, but dude,
I know it's pretty heavy.
no.
Can you imagine sitting with your date and watching that Russian roulette scene?
Oh man!
But you know,
man.
I got to hand it to her. She took the movie very well. Now I had another. My ex took her to see Platoon, and man, she walked out after that.
Wow.
Kid getting his head bashed. But the Deer Hunter, yeah, that was a very heavy film. Great. You know, the cast: Robert De Niro, Meryl Streep, John Cazale. You know, on and on. I could talk about this film.
Sure.
This is beautiful scenes, the deer hunting scenes themselves. But man, when it transitions to the Pennsylvania small town, you know, these Greek Orthodox, you know, families and stuff, and then all of a sudden, bam, they're in Vietnam. Next thing you know, he's got a flamethrower on Vietnamese, you know. And then from there, it's just intensity the rest of the movie. And man, by the time you're done with that movie, you're exhausted. So great date movie. 1979, The Warriors. Walter Hill. Oh man, I saw this by myself the first time, and then I tried to talk all my buddies into go and see it. And when they went and saw it, they weren't as impressed with it as I was. But yeah, this is another one of those violent films that was really appeared to be more violent than it actually was. You hardly saw any blood. Yeah, you saw bruises on their face. There was some great slow motion stuff. The opening scene, you know, when you see all the gangs coming into the subways, the voice of the disc jockey, you know, kind of narrating this Odyssey, you know, and this is kind of sort of based on the Odyssey in a way. You know? They had the sirens and stuff.
the story of 300 Spartans.
Yep. But man, I don't know. I just love this movie. The warriors themselves, Swan and Ajax and Cochise, and back then I could name every one of them. But,
and
I loved it.
And that
That
soundtrack.
soundtrack, very
That
boy.
breakthrough
Electronic
synthesized soundtrack, man, it's so good.
Oh, and one of the all-time villains in a movie, you know, Luther, David Patrick Kelly, you know, this bandana, I can't remember the name of his gang. They drove around the Rogues. They drove around this shitty wagon-looking thing, spray painted all over it. But yeah, it was. Oh man, I just love that movie. I could watch it over and over again. At the end of '79, I saw a film that kind of changed my view of how I watch movies. For sure, was this movie. I saw it and I said, "This movies can be more than just movies. They can be art." You know.
Yeah.
Apocalypse Now, Francis Ford Coppola. I saw it at the at that Highland Park Village Theater, and this is the first theater where they installed Dolby sound, and kind of reminded me of that documentary I saw, Waves. If you've never seen this, watch it. But it talks about the sound design. You know, that opening scene, the napalm scene. You know, the whoop whoop whoop. You know, the helicopter. Whoop, whoop,
Yeah.
And hearing from the one side of the theater to another.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I was really blown away by the sound of a film. You know, and that's The Heart of Darkness, basically the Joseph Conrad sort of based on that, but it takes from David Ayer's dispatches, you know, the dialogue of Martin Sheen, and it's just a trip. That movie is really a trip, and then finally, just Marlon Brando's Compound, and oh my God, Dennis Hopper and as that nutty photographer. But the 70s were my favorite era of films, and that just kind of the end of that era was just fantastic. And I've watched Apocalypse Now probably more times than any other film I've ever watched.
Yeah, no, that's truth. Hey, Zach, the 70s, brother. What was happening? What were you wearing in the 70s, bro?
Bell bottoms, window panes.
Like I said, I was about 4 because, like I said, I was born in '76, so I'm a little bit past y'all. So, like I said, this is where I'm coming into movies because these are the movies that I get to discover when I'm getting older. So the first one that I'll bring up is one that we brought up 2 weeks ago,
Okay.
And that is, of course, Enter the Dragon.
Yes.
Released a week after Bruce Lee passes away.
Yes.
It is a legendary film because not only does it bring Bruce Lee and cement his cement his iconography as a Hollywood legend, but you've also got great fight sequences. Jim Kelly, John Saxon. John Saxon, we also lost this week.
Yes.
And of course, you're finally getting the greatness that is martial arts and Hong Kong cinema into crossover mainstream audiences.
Yes.
And it's just fantastic, and it has been for years. It's a classic that holds up. That soundtrack, the slow motion, and of course, Bruce Lee at the top of his game. It is a beautiful film.
Oh, I wish I still had that Bruce Lee poster.
Oh my God.
With the 2 sticks.
It's still just so good.
Yes.
And you know, you have the great villain in Mr. Han, and of course you've got the spectacular fight sequences. It still just holds up, and again, like I said, it's important because you're getting to see the one of the first Asian action heroes. You're getting to see Jim Kelly,
Yes.
who is great on
Yes.
screen, just charismatic to a fault, and of course just great at what he does. John Saxon just being the sleazy, underscored hero of the movie.
Yes.
All these great
So
icons,
good.
elements, it is just the perfect 70s kung fu film.
Mm.
If you're going to introduce anyone to martial arts cinema, this is where you start because it is the absolute perfection. But then go into everything else. Go into the Shaw Brothers stuff. Go into Bruce Lee's other film, The Fury Way, The Dragon Center. It's so good. I can't rave about it enough.
I'm with you.
The second one that I chose is a film that unexpectedly became one of my favorites over the years, and that is Paul Newman's Slapshot. I'm not a hockey fan.
Right.
I'm not a sports fan, but this movie is so profane and funny and well paced and well written. It's just absolutely it's absolutely a sharp piece about an underdog team basically getting into fights and basically rising to the top of their game by doing what they're not supposed to do. Paul Newman is just this terrible owner, or a terrible coach. But like I said, he brings his people up to the top. You have just a ragtag bunch of people, misfits coming together and being a great team of just very violent, crazy people. And of course, the Hanson brothers.
Yeah.
It's that great line of 70s sleaze that when you think about the 70s and things like that, you think of the iconic movies and things like that.
Far out.
Like you're
solid.
Right. I think of stuff like Dog of the Afternoon. You think of The Godfather and things like that. But as comedies go, like I said, this is kind of one of those gritty, underground, funny comedies that it grows on you each time you watch.
Let's see.
It just gets better each time you see it. Finally, I chose a film that, like I said, really kind of launched what cult cinema was in the 70s, and that, of course, is the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Rocky Horror Picture Show is not a great film. It's not a great musical, but it's a great culture. It is because it starts the midnight movies of the 70s, and it makes people enjoy being in the theater together with people who you like, who like you. It's basically, it grew such a following not because it was a great film, but because it brought people together and in celebration of a terrible film.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, the
Celebrated misfits, and a lot
yeah.
of misfits would go see it because they identified with some of the characters in the film.
Exactly, and I mean
They could just be themselves and let loose and have fun and
Yeah.
dress up,
Yeah,
and they could just be themselves.
Right, it's an iconic film for weirdos, and like I said, being a weird kid as I was, like I said, it's a film that I discovered in the '90s because 20 years later, 30 years later,
Sure.
almost nearing almost 40 years later, it's still making an impact on audiences because it's an enjoyable experience to go see this film with a whole lot of other people who love this film.
Yeah.
And that's what you go to the theater for, to enjoy with other people. And Rocky Horror Picture Show stands up because it is a gathering of what you're not supposed to see, what you're not supposed to do in a theater, and it happens, and it's still fun.
Yeah. Yeah. It shows you the power of film. So when you think about media, we know that bands, can draw a crowd and people will come. And we're all there because we love that music, and we all are together, and we love the people next to us because if they're a Snoop Dogg fan, or if they're a Rush fan, or whatever the band is, music pulls you together, right? Sports pulls you together. Everybody comes together, and if you're all wearing blue and you're all Cowboy fans, right? And so here was movies. People coming together to sit and watch something that they probably could have sat and watched at home if it got the DVD or something like that. But instead, it's that movement, and I think Alamo Drafthouse jumps on top of it with their quotable nights and all that stuff. There's still something about even a movie, just watching something on a film. Because like the band is live, the sports is live, but the film is not. It's already been edited, processed, put out there, and packaged, and now you're watching with a bunch of people. So now it better have some good themes, or it better relate to people, or hit a chord, or have some good music, or some combination of all that, or maybe even some good dialogue. And so movies prove that, hey, we can get a bunch of people to come together like sports fans would, or music fans would, around a band.
Right, and in the 60s you had the drive-in, and in the 70s you had, the darker underground theaters and things like that.
Yeah.
So this is where you're getting underground films to really kind of build up and grow and things like that. So not only are they standing, with stuff like the Ten Commandments and Ben-Hur and things like that, but now
Spartacus.
But now you've got films that are getting seen that wouldn't be seen otherwise because you've got stuff like the Pink Flamingos, you've got Rocky Horror Picture Show, you've got the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, all these films that get underground followings because they're bringing people into the theaters.
That's right. That's right. And now you can sell the memorabilia as well. And now, just like a band that's traveling that has a concert shirt, you can now get a T-shirt of a movie that you liked.
Because we can smell our own.
That's it. That's exactly it. And you can, and definitely in the shirt, you can smell it, right, in the armpit area. But there you go. So, so in the 70s, for me, I had to think of some things as well. And I think one thing that was very important for me to see as a young black kid was to see Shaft in 1971. That was important. Not only that, the music, Isaac Hayes, the theme of Shaft. Even if you've never seen the movie, you know Shaft. You know the song. You know Isaac Hayes from that, and that part about shut your mouth. Everybody kind of knows that. And that just that line in that song captures exactly that mood of what's going on. So you have Richard Roundtree playing John Shaft. You have he goes up against gang dealers, Moses Gunn's character, which was a guy named Bumpy in the film, and then he goes against some white mafia as well, who are then trying to extort. But this is a film where, for me, here's this black guy it's about him. And he's got power. He's got clout. He's suave. He knows how to get himself in and out of situations. I would also argue that maybe Lando Calrissian's character was kind of robbed a little bit. They borrowed, not robbed, but they borrowed a little bit of Shaft. Because Lando Calrissian was a player, right? And it was the way he got that ship from Han Solo. So there's that suave and smooth that you can almost see, but you can't go there first unless you talk about John Shaft in the 70s. And so when I saw Shaft, I saw a black dude doing all that kind of stuff. I was empowered. I was like, okay, all right, this is good. I like Donner, Superman, and all that stuff, but I got to see something else too. I can't see all the heroes be one group of people. I got to see somebody else, and so to see what he was doing.
Yeah, and it's actually giving a film with a budget.
Yes,
because I mean, films like this, where the Rudy Ray Moore, the Melvin Van Peebles stuff, which was getting an audience but wasn't getting any money.
That's right.
And
that's exactly right.
And now you finally got MGM behind it, funding this really great film.
Yes, and you got to remember too, in the 70s, well, a lot of times when you saw portrayals of black people in the 70s in films, they were either drug dealers or they were just bad guys. They were gang
Superfly.
Superfly,
Good
something like
example.
that, or they were pimps. And that's all you had. So when Richard Roundtree comes out as Shaft, then you know, and of course since then they've already tried to remake this when they tried to put Samuel Jackson in the movie and try to have him do Shaft, and then it was okay the first time when they did it in the 90s, the first one that they did with Christian Bale.
Right?
Yeah,
that was
and
good. I like
what was
that.
his name? Joe Peoples.
Peoples.
Yeah, I forgot that actor's name, but I love him as well. He played Basquiat.
Right. Yeah.
Right,
Last
right.
name
His name was Right.
was
Right.
last name. Yeah, I can't
That's
remember
right.
his first name.
The second movie then is probably not a surprise. It's going to be Aliens, 1979. So the 70s started well, if you will, with Shaft for me, and then it ended well in '79 with a movie called Alien. This movie scared the crap out of me.
Too. That was
It
another
was
date movie for me.
It was another date movie.
Yeah.
See, that's what Carlos was doing. See, that's why he was single. That's
at
why
the
he-
Medallion Theater on Northwest Highway. Yep. I still remember. Oh my
It was
God.
the deal. And so to take a horror movie and put it out in space and then play on our minds with what this xenomorph might look like, what it might be, what it might do, the collection of people from different spaces trying to figure out what to do, trapped up in space. And I love the tagline of the poster. It said, "In Scream, no one can hear you scream. In space, no one can hear you scream." Yeah. And I'm like, this is just brilliant. I mean, why wouldn't I go see a movie like this? And then, of course, my favorite line to say about it is I love that Sigourney Weaver last. The woman doesn't die first by tripping over something, and then the monster kills her. And the black guy doesn't die first because he dies second to last, right? So this is in '79. They were already breaking that rule of having to have these people die early in the film or being chased and have to fall down over something, and then the monster get them. So I love that. And then, of course, I can't not talk about what happened in the middle of the '70s, which changed the world literally. And that was George Lucas coming on the scene, being dissed by Disney, who later on had to buy his property for $4.2 billion. If they'd have got him on board back then, they'd have saved a lot of money. But George Lucas comes out with this film, 1977 Star Wars, and it was a film that was doomed not to make it. The production problems that they had, the money they weren't going to have to finish some of the ideas that he wanted for the props. He wasn't happy. He actually went to the hospital for a while, a little bit of depression and other things that were going on with him just to get this movie out. But boy, what a movie.
I just watched it again yesterday. Man, it's still
Doesn't it still hold
It makes me
up?
feel like a kid again, literally.
Yes.
I just feel like Rogue One, Red One, and all that. That final attack on the Death Star is just.
You want to talk about a movie that hits all the themes, the universal themes. In this movie, you have the theme of the young boy growing up, doesn't want to be a farmer. Uncle says, no, come on, just be a farmer. He wants to be a pilot. He wants to be a guy that goes out there and does good. You have the themes of religion in it with the Force and all this stuff. You have the theme of the wiser man passing down what he knows to the younger man. You have the theme of the absentee father who's not there, who this boy is scrambling in the first place to try to figure out who his identity is and what he's supposed to be. So for people saying it's just a kid's movie with pew, 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 on the surface, yeah, you can see that. But after watching it several times and putting it into context, George Lucas is talking about the relationship between him and his dad, and then how a son can redeem the dad. And George Lucas talks about that later on in a certain other way many years after Luke Skywalker. So the whole idea of Star Wars, this young kid that's doesn't know who he is but needs to be something, doesn't know where he comes from other than whatever his aunt and uncle will tell him, and they're suppressing him. That's any kid that's a teenager gets angsty and wants to get out, right? And then the greatness of Alex Guinn playing, Ben Kenobi. In all of our lives, we need to meet that one person that's smart, that's with it, that's got it together, who mentors us. Nobody pulls themselves up by the bootstraps. That's one of the biggest myths and lies ever. And then you see Han Solo, the guy who you thought was just a scoundrel, comes back to help his buddy at the end. And so when they do the ceremony you are super excited, not just because Darth Vader spins off and the good guy gets there and Luke does well, but you actually feel the triumphant scene at the end. And then the music. You can't talk about Star Wars without talking about the soundtrack and the music.
John Williams score, baby.
Yes, who also did the score for the great Magnificent Seven that I also talked about earlier today. So with that, I can never not, when I think about the 70s, I certainly can't not mention the impact of Star Wars and what it
All-time
did.
classic, yeah.
So
Absolutely.
All right.
that's crazy. So here we go.
We are about 5 minutes out, so do we want to go ahead and save the 80s and the 90s for our next time?
We can do that.
let's do
Let's
that.
do that.
Let's do that because I think we've had a pretty robust discussion. So,
Yeah.
how about you, sitting at home? What were your favorite flicks of the '60s? And maybe if you weren't around then and you want to know what kind of great movies to watch of the '60s, maybe we gave you some good ones. What were your favorite movies of the '70s? Put it in the comment section. Let us know, and we'll definitely check that out. So, since we'll go ahead and go to the '80s and '90s and 2000s next time. Then we'll go ahead and jump into the shout outs. And
All right.
who do you want to shout out to, Film
Hey,
Samurai?
I want to thank my cousin Joel for a great birthday present. He sent me a Batman mask. It's really unusual. I posted a picture on my Twitter if anybody wants to see it.
Sweet.
Stella, my daughter, my son, Matt, and Nicole, they're doing great out down there in Austin area. And just all my film Twitter friends, great recommendations of films and discussion. It's great.
Awesome. Love it. Film Twitter. K-Zach.
All right, I do want to shout out our counterparts who alternate shows with us every first and third Sunday. That's, of course, Eddie Medina and Cole Houston. We will be back next week with more of the with the Ment Pit. We'll be going, of course, deep depth into more Star Wars stuff, as we always do on Sundays. I'm not entirely certain, but we do also have we'll have Isle of Toys coming back, which, of course, is our show for the toy collector, and Figments, the Unexplained Mysteries podcast, hosted by Ian Colleen, where we get into cryptids and unexplained phenomena and conspiracy theories. We'll be bringing that back here very shortly, DallasOnAir.com. And, of course, I do want to go ahead and just shout out all our shows here on DallasOnAir.com. That includes 12-Pack, that includes Say Something, that includes Best for Business, that includes all the shows on our lineup. Do check out DallasOnAir.com. Check out our full lineup of shows because there's something here for everyone. Yeah.
Love it, love it. And my shout outs are going to go to Michael Paul, who's been watching us, Stephanie Crane. I also want to give a shout out to Daniel Mesa, Mad Mel. For all of you who are just now finding the show, certainly comment, let me know so I can get you in the shout outs. I'd love to shout you out as well. Thank you for spending your time with us on Sundays. And so that's pretty much it from here. We will see you. We are on every second and fourth Sunday. So we'll see you not next week, but the week after. However, we have some lost episodes that will be posted this week. So you'll have this episode and some of the lost episodes coming out in between now and the next time we get together, which will be more than likely, is it August 8th? Is that right, or is it?
Let me double check that just to be sure.
That's right. I know I put him on the spot the last
That's
minute.
going to be Sunday, August 9th.
Sunday, August 9th, so I was close. So Sunday, August 9th, that's when we will see you again with a brand new installment. We will look at the 90s, the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. And by the way, that show will be happening around my birthday, so we'll do that as well. So until then, we want to thank you guys for watching. And
Sayonara.
Sayonara.
Let's do it next
Hoorah.
time. We'll see ya.
See you next
Wear
week.
your masks.
See you in a couple of weeks. Wear your mask. Wash your hands.
Get rid of this COVID.
Election day in 100 days. Go vote.
That's it. Definitely vote.